Some say it's a classic, and others say it's overrated, but just how good is The Killing Joke nearly 35 years after its first release? Woof woof! Hey guys, it's me Marcus, aka The Mad Dog, and we're back with another video. Written by Alan Moore and illustrated by Brian Bolland, Batman The Killing Joke was published by DC Comics in March of 1988, and the Joker's escaped Arkham Asylum. Again. Hot on his tail is a Batman who's determined to try and avoid fighting the Clown Prince of Crime until one of them meets their end. But this time it's personal, because the Joker's gone after Commissioner Gordon. And what happens when the line between good and evil, insanity and lunacy, can be shattered with just one bad day? And worse than that, what if the heroes of Gotham City can fall victim as well? Jumping into the art section, and do I really need to say anything more than it's Brian Bolland? Maybe my British bias is going to be showing early on in this review, but by God is he phenomenal. This is one of those books that still manages to blow me away every single time that I read it. And one thing that I want to point out early on in this review is that this was the first time that I've ever read The Killing Joke with the original colours, and I think it does so much more for the tone of the story. It felt more abstract and creepy. The uses of yellows and greens for light and shadows just added an extra level to this. And sure, I don't think it's as polished as the updated colouring, but it's just so much more gothic in style. Especially that last scene, and fair warning, this book's been out for nearly 35 years and it takes about 10 minutes to read, so I'm not really going to shy away from too many spoilers, but the colours in the original were just gorgeous. Having the sunrise behind the duo with the reds, the yellows, the purples. I think for this scene alone it'll be the reason why I'll mostly go for the original colourings when I come back to this book in future. And I think the recolouring actually took away some of the personality of The Killing Joke. One thing that I realised this time as well is that Bolland's Batman and Joker are pretty much the textbook versions for me. And I think everybody will have that artist that if you think of the character in your head, there will be a particular look that they'll have. Sometimes it's also Jim Lee just because of how important Batman Hush was to me, but more often than not, it's actually these versions that I see. And Bolland's style is mostly realistic, but there are some exaggerated aspects, but not all of these work for me. The elongation of Joker's face, or there'd just be an occasion where Batman's neck just looked way too long. And not in that quirky Tim Sale kind of way where he pulls it off because everything looks like that. However, I can live with that if the trade-off is the Joker's wide, iconic smile, people having their eyes open so wide that they look like the moon, or just the expressions that Bolland manages to convey. Another thing that he does great, which also probably comes down to the scripting and stuff like that, is the paneling and the framing. In a similar way to Watchmen, it mostly respects that 3x3, or sometimes it goes even more Golden Age with a 3x2 type of paneling, but it knew when to ditch that off. For huge moments, it would dedicate more space so that it demanded your attention, or when we were falling deeper into the Joker's lunacy, the panels would be crooked. The only really disappointing thing about The Killing Joke's art is that there isn't enough landscapes or establishing shots. And I know Bolland's mostly known for doing covers, so I'm not sure if those aspects of storytelling are really his forte, but we don't even really get a good look at his Arkham Asylum, and we only really see his Gotham as an afterthought in a few panels. But considering how iconic his Batman and Joker were to me, it just would have been something that I really would have appreciated. And the flashback scenes are the only element that I think actually looked better with the recolouring. Because the palette was changed, it allowed it to look like it was set during a different time period, whereas when I was reading the original colouring, it kind of just looked as if the ink had faded a bit. But whichever version of this that you read, you're in for a great time if you really like a hyper-realistic style. And sure, yeah, I like the original colouring, but you might like the new version, and it's just great that you can experience both within the same hardcover thanks to the Absolute Edition, which you can pick up from the channel sponsor, Organic Price Books. They've got great packaging, fast shipping, and amazing customer services, and if you use code WOOFWOOF, you'll get $2 off your order. And if you're ordering 3 or more books and you want them to be delivered together, make sure you use code WOOFWOOF, ship it together for 5% off your entire order. Don't worry, you can just copy and paste them from the description down below, and you can use these codes as many times as you like. Jumping into the story now, and I know with any book that has a claim, it's always going to have its detractors. So this review won't please everybody, but I've enjoyed The Killing Joke every time that I've read it, and it was no exception on this occasion. I don't think it's perfect, but from the opening page, I'm just invested. I love that it just starts as another day for Batman, that he's visiting Arkham, he's investigating a case, he's getting fooled by the Joker, but there's always just so much more than that. This 48-page story gives me more than most 6-issue miniseries do. In large part that is due to more scripts because they are girthy, to say the least. Like, just look at this. You've got these 2 pages and that page, and that's all just for the first panel. Do you know that first panel where you're looking at a puddle? That took 2.5 pages worth of script. And then there's me who can barely follow a simple instruction at work. But there were some things that I noticed that I probably overlooked on my previous readings. For example, the Batman in this doesn't always feel like Batman. I'm comfortable with him not being the main character, and I think this actually does a better job of doing a Joker-centric book than the Brian Azzarello yellow one that was just titled Joker. But I'd still want you to get Batman right, and there's a lot of occasions in this where it doesn't feel like Bruce Wayne's underneath the cowl. And I get that when this was released it wasn't supposed to be in continuity, but this is the most British Batman that I've ever read. He says bloody in the way that Brits do, and he calls someone a smear of slime, and it just doesn't feel right. And I think it can be seen as good in a way because it shows just how desperate Batman is in this situation, but still there was a few occasions where it felt like Moore didn't know what Batman he wanted. In saying that though, I do love how this wasn't just a weird vomit comic. Sometimes Alan Moore can be too in love with what he's saying, and he often just fills the panel unnecessarily and blocks some of the beautiful art, but that's not the case here. With less pages, he actually managed to refine his story even more. I love the silent pages where Batman was just trying to track Joker, and it just let you infer all the conversations that were happening, and it was just a great example of less being more. Alan Moore. This is why people don't like it. Everything feels deliberate, the pace is managed so well, and I absolutely flew through this book because it didn't feel like it was trying to waste me time. The only asterisk that I will put next to it not wasting my time is the Joker's musical. And who knows, maybe that was the inspiration behind the rumours that we're hearing about the Joaquin Phoenix sequel. And from a linguistic and a lyrical stance, it is impressive that Moore's able to do this, because the lines still did have a flow to them and it felt like stuff that the Joker would be singing, but I just hated this. And this one page felt longer than the rest of the book, and I can forgive it because of how good the flashback scenes are. Sure, there's a chance that these never actually happened in the Joker's history, but I just think that there's too much detail in there for it to be a complete fabrication. The connection to the Red Hood also made me comfortable enough to think that this could be true, and if it is, then I really have to feel bad for this guy. And it's good that it can manage to make me have that thought without ever diminishing the villainous aspect of the Joker. But they really laid it on thick with this guy. He lost his wife, his unborn baby, and he realised that he was in a dead-end career. Like, I hate my life, but I've only got the last of those three problems. And the fact that it can both be an origin story or just a completely random event in the Joker's life is the reason why this is so great. And regardless of which of those options are correct, it still deserves its place in me where to start Joker. Yet this isn't just a Joker origin story, which is probably for the best if there's a chance that it might not even be true. The way it explores the relationship between him and Batman is interesting, but it felt like it was more just trying to point us in a direction rather than actually saying something. If anything, Batman is too on the nose with how he opens up about the Joker. And there were times where it felt like this was more like a father and son relationship than two mortal enemies. I know in the years since, Moore has gone on record for saying how he wished this story would have been sillier and it was a bit too serious, and I found myself wondering if that was the reason why something felt off about the way that these two interacted. Additionally, the stakes just never really felt that high for Jim Gordon, which is kind of the opposite of the way that I usually like it. I found myself getting more invested when it's possible that one person's going to get harmed than when there's a threat against an entire planet. Again, it is the case of good overcoming evil and making sure that the Joker's stopped, but he tortured Jim Gordon and he just seemed pretty okay with it. And during the first time that I read this, after Barbara Gordon got shot, I knew that they weren't also going to kill Jim off, so it just never really feels like there's any reason to worry about him, which is disappointing considering that he's pretty much the linchpin to the Joker's plan. And it's weird as well when it comes to Barbara Gordon, because if this wasn't supposed to be in continuity, then this shouldn't have had as much oomph as it did, but I love that this carried over and gave us Oracle. And it's just crazy to me that something that was supposed to be a standalone one-shot managed to break through into the main continuity, to the point that when the New 52 announced that Barbara Gordon was going to be Batgirl again, which, by the way, New 52, still my jam, there was uproar. People saying that this was an aspect of the character that should never be reversed, but at the same time it was something that was never meant to stick in the first place. And I just like that irony. Regardless, this ends with a great final fight. Batman is a little bit too easy to hit in my opinion, but you might still be jet lagged because he travelled all the way from Britain, but it is brutal. You can feel the anger behind every attack that Batman makes, and Joker's still just clowning around, but you don't know if this is going to be the moment where Batman's just completely lost it. And it's just a shame that this fight wasn't longer. I know that the ending's also one of those things that's now up for debate. It looks like Grant Morrison just completely opened a can of worms when it came to this. And with this being a short comic, there isn't really a lot else that I can say that I probably haven't already spoiled in this video, so I'm just going to jump into the spoiler section. This is your final spoiler warning, so if you don't want anything else ruined on top of everything that I've already ruined in this video, then skip to the final verdict. And I read The Killing Joke this time with the idea in mind that Batman did kill the Joker in the end. And I think it's very easy to see the evidence when that's the case. Sure, yes, if you convince yourself hard enough, you can find anything. And I know Moore has denied it himself, but I think that this book becomes something more. Alan Moore. No, don't do it again. If that is the case. The speech at the beginning with Batman saying that if they don't change the ways, one of them will end up killing the other, even though that was quoted at the end at a time when the Joker didn't actually actually hear that because he had that decoy in the beginning. The Joker's laugh going away and also the beam of light disappearing just all seems like it was pointing towards something else going on. And sure, yeah, there is a warm feeling that I get when I don't look at it that way, and it's just two people having a little bit of a laugh together and breaking the character and the stigma that they've had for the years before, almost like they'd never known each other before, or maybe they'd even been friends prior to this. And it gave Joker that brief moment of validation that maybe he wasn't that bad of a comedian in the first place. And I like it from that aspect because it's Batman giving Joker this little bit of hope. And yes, I know the murder angle is more fanfiction than it is theory, but it's still a really interesting one. And why not have this as one of those endings that's open for debate on if it happened or if it didn't? This is a universe where anything can happen, so I don't get why some people just immediately disregard it as soon as it's mentioned. It is fun to look at it from a different angle and to wonder what if, even if it has irrevocably been refuted. This is my final verdict. And there are a few rules in comics that have been deemed unbreakable. You can't resurrect Uncle Ben. Captain America's war has to be World War II. And the Joker's origin should never be certain. But this short one-shot story does seem to be the exception to that rule. With just 48 pages, Moore and Bolland managed to give us an origin story for the Joker with enough plausible deniability so that we can decide whether or not it was real. And I have to admit, I don't think it's as perfect as some would lead you to believe. It doesn't really have enough time to show you Gotham, the stakes aren't really there when it comes to Jim Gordon, and the Batman in this doesn't feel like the one that I know. And after reading Harleen last year, I think that book might edge this as my favourite villain origin story, but it's nowhere near what its detractors try to say it is as well. The Joker in this is textbook, giving us a version of this character that's still referenced today. The lasting effects of this gave us some of Barbara Gordon's best stories. Brian Bolland is just the man on the art and gives it 100% in every single panel. And even if Alan Moore doesn't look fondly on his own writing, I still think that this is one of his most accessible works. There's a reason that I keep coming back to this book, and I enjoy it every single time that I do, and I can't see that changing in future. And because of that, when I weigh everything up, I'm gonna give this a very decent score of 75%. Woof woof! So that's the video, hopefully you enjoyed it. Until next time, just make sure that you stay safe, and stay mad all you dogs. Woof woof! See you in the next video.